Welcome once again to the Grand Compendium. I have more stories of RPGs gone wrong that I'd like to share with you. Our first story is about a new couple trying to take over their D&D table, and the second is of a player who was banned from their table twice, only for it to then collapse. Let's get straight into it. Our first story is titled, Two Players Got Together and Then Held the Game Hostage. Okay, so, full context, my group of friends can be messy, which I suppose isn't rare for D&D players. We've been playing this particular homebrew game since November-ish 2021, and we're all super invested. The table is as follows. Me, female 24, paladin, ranger, non-binary 24, wizard, male 23, cleric, female 25, bard, male 23, and GM, non-binary 24. Last year, the cleric and bard players got together, properly out of table. This isn't unusual for our table. The ranger and GM got into a relationship after a year of playing the campaign, and are still in a relationship. Cleric and bard got together after me and the bard were planning on having our characters do a romance arc towards the end of the campaign, for maximum emotional impact/angst, as the bard had backstory connections that meant it was super likely he would die to the BBEG via sacrifice or betrayal of the party. The cleric did not like this. She first began insinuating that I had feelings for Bard. I did not. I'm in my own relationship with someone who does not play in this campaign. And that I was lonely, taking my romantic desires to the table. The cleric and bard had always been the players least invested in the campaign, and the two slowly began withdrawing themselves from it, including showing little to no interest when we played in person, which I hosted in my home, and they would stay for the long weekend since they both traveled from a different city, whereas me and the rest of the table lived within 30 minutes of each other. The cleric began treating me like a hotel hostess, making me do her laundry, washing up, she and the bard using my kitchen facilities without asking, demanding I get a comfier guest bed/duvet/pillows just for them, complaining when I request there is no NSFW business on my guest bed. This came as an insane surprise to me, seeing as the cleric was my best friend for many years since meeting on the first week of university, and, before getting with the bard, had no complaints about me hosting her for the previous couple of years. Eventually I had enough. I told the cleric and bard about my frustrations regarding hosting the in-person sessions. They seemed to use this as a weapon against me to the rest of the group, and said they no longer wanted to play the campaign if I was still involved. The bard completely went no contact with me out of the blue. The other players essentially refused the cleric's request to keep playing, but removing me, and the cleric then kept the game hostage. I did say I was happy to drop out if they all wanted to keep playing, but the ranger and wizard said they didn't want to play without me. This kept on for maybe 2 to 3 months, no playing, no talking about the campaign. Everyone was unhappy, mostly because the golden days of the early sessions are still very fondly remembered in our heads, and completely achievable to maintain if the above never happened. Now me, the ranger, wizard, and GM are planning on continuing without them, so we can finish off 5 years of investment, with us also planning to kill off the cleric and bard in game. I will forever be wondering if that's mean or not, since the others did help make the campaign truly special once upon a time. My paladin, who had sworn an oath to protect the bard, now feels a little aimless as we go into that final arc without the emotional connection driving home the angst and stakes of who lives and dies. Edit. As people are weirdly focused on the guest bed thing, it's specifically a pull-out sofa bed in the living room. This story was a bit shorter, but I think you can take away some good lessons from it. First off, cleric and bard seem to have maybe lost interest in this campaign, if they've begun to participate less, but it could also be the fact that they have to drive a long way to get to that session that bothers them. That doesn't mean it's fine for them to disrespect OP for accommodating them by letting them stay the night. Especially the no NSFW stuff on the guest bed rule. I really hope there wasn't an incident that led to that. But the only thing I can think of that makes sense to explain Cleric's attitude is jealousy. She's seeing OP's character in the Bard leaning towards a romantic subplot, and feels like she's being slighted in some way, which could make sense given that Bard and Cleric have only been together for a short while up to that point. But that's only speculation. Clearly, if that were the case, Cleric lacks the ability to distinct a player from their character. Personally, I'm not a fan of romance in my D&D games, but if the whole table is comfortable with it, it's fine. So I don't know why Cleric couldn't bring up any in-game issues they had if that were the case. If there was any, they could have just talked to the rest of the table and sort out something more respectfully. As for the players choosing to kill the characters after they were gone, I don't know why. It seems unnecessary. You can write characters out of your campaign without killing them. That just seems like a spiteful action for no good reason. Anyways, the story is a little murky, I guess. I mean, clearly, Cleric and Bard are in the wrong, but their actions just kind of seem out of the blue. Anyways, that's our first story done, so let's move on to our second. Our second story is titled, DM's Friend Kept Breaking the Game, DM Banned Me Twice, and the whole campaign collapsed. This goes back maybe a decade or so ago, but it's still my most memorable RPG horror story. TLDR, DM protected his friend, got me falsely banned twice with fake evidence and false accusations, and the game died soon after I left. While in high school, I first started getting involved with playing RPGs online. I enjoyed games that were diplomatic and involved strategy. I'm a big history nerd and follow geopolitics. I found a small community of like-minded players. One of them, who I'll call Michael, proposed an alternate history game set after World War I. It was pretty cool, and he'd clearly put a lot of time and effort into it. The best way to describe the run of play is to think of it like Hearts of Iron 4, but with some D&D mechanics. I was interested right away and chose to play as the United Kingdom. Before I go any further, this was hosted on some forum website that I can't remember the name of. However, because you could run multiple sub-forums, we had separate spaces to post stuff without clogging up the main forum. The administrator of our page was a guy I'll call David, and to be able to DM the game, David made Michael a moderator. Playing alongside me was a guy I never really saw eye to eye with. I'll call him James. We had roleplayed together before, but the erratic nature of his play, how loose he was with the rules, and how dismissive he was of others' complaints never sat right with me. James chose to play France. As soon as the game started, he immediately disregarded the realism and limits Michael had laid out. France started the game as a republic in the midst of a political strife. James flipped this. He made out that France was actually a monarchy, while the revolutionaries were hunting down the royal family. James had a random character stop the revolution by simply proclaiming himself the new king. I raised concerns with Michael about this. He reassured me not to worry, and that he'll make sure James doesn't go too far. That should have been a red flag, as I would later discover, but I was so interested in Michael's world building that I put my trust in him as the DM. However, things would only get more erratic from James, and we would continue to clash. There was an instance where he claimed a French submarine had secretly surfaced off the Shetland Islands, and the crew were planting the flags of Greater Scandinavia on the islands, who I was having a territorial dispute with. I know there were a few other times James and I clashed, but I can't remember. I messaged Michael again about James's behavior. I wasn't alone in this, as several other players had publicly complained about James. Let's pause here for a second. First off, I have no clue how you'd play a Hearts of Iron-like game that includes things from D&D. Are they playing as the leaders of each country, or are they just the country itself? And also, for those who don't know, Hearts of Iron 4 is a real-time strategy game set just before and during World War II. But anyways, as I was saying, this just feels like an idea that failed before it could even begin. I don't know how you'd accomplish this at all. I also don't want to be rude or assume anything, but OP starting the story with "I'm a big history nerd and follow geopolitics" makes me kinda have a feeling that OP is sort of one of those actually this or that type of person. Though that is just me being a dick and assuming. But this is coming from someone who'd also say they're a big history nerd. So I feel like I'm allowed to say that. Anyways, I don't know how much of this game was pre-established before they began playing. Like, did they have a sort of session 0 or something and know exactly what they were trying to go for? I just feel like OP saying this was going to be an alternate history game and then complaining when James plays a France that has an alternate history is just kind of a moot point and sort of hypocritical of what they were going for. And that also kind of justifies what I just said. But anyways, so far I don't see any major red flags as of yet. So let's continue. When I logged in the next day, I discovered I had been banned for 3 days. I emailed David asking why I had been banned, as only administrators could ban players. David explained that Michael had recommended I be banned for abusive messaging. He showed me screenshots Michael had sent him. I was shocked. My messages had been doctored to make it appear I was out of control. One message I remember had been doctored to make out I claimed I was God. When I informed David of this, then showed him screenshots of the actual messages after my ban had finished, he intervened. He made a public post saying that abuse of others will not be tolerated. He created a subforum where players could voice any disagreements or point out historical discrepancies in the alternate history game. Michael, probably on the direction of David, stated he'd be more fair in his decision making. James also agreed to be a little more realistic in his plays. It was around this time I learned, and I can't remember from whom, that Michael and James were close friends in real life. Things settled down for a while, gameplay continued, and James and I avoided interacting unless it was necessary for the flow of the game. However, it didn't last. One day, James and a player I'll call Sebastian declared that France and Yugoslavia had entered an alliance. Sebastian was playing as Yugoslavia. As a part of this alliance, France and Yugoslavia would exchange resources. I was curious about the resources being exchanged, and did some research. I found a paper made by the USA from 1924 on Yugoslavia's mineral deposits, and found the resource Sebastian was exchanging didn't exist in Yugoslavia. I posted this on David's new subforum, including the link to the paper. Was I being spiteful by doing this? Yeah, probably. James and I had some minor clashes in the lead up to this, and my tolerance for him was running thin. There was some international conference in-game, and James's gameplay irritated me because he wasn't being entirely truthful and was twisting known facts. The next day I discovered I had been banned for 7 days. I asked David what happened. Michael had told him I was being abusive and had become argumentative in the game forum. I told David that wasn't true. I had posted in the subforum he created. David apologized. I then spent the next 7 days stewing. When the ban finished, I discovered Michael had essentially nerfed me to oblivion while I was away. 25% of my territory had been separated from the British Empire, becoming independent states, and put some civil unrest modifier on the UK. All the while, James had received favorable treatment. The only way I can describe what I did next was spiting the dummy. I went through and deleted all my posts in the alternate history game, then deleted my account. On reflection, I regret doing it. It was childish, but at the time, it felt like the only way to push back against what had been happening. David emailed me later saying he didn't agree with me deleting my posts, but he understood why I did it. He told me after my actions, the game fell apart. Deleting posts had ruined continuity, and when other players learned why I had been banned, they left the game. That's the end of the story, and I'm feeling a little miffed about it overall. James was clearly a problem, especially when he got OP banned the first time by taking his messages completely out of context. It's also clear that Michael is giving James special treatment. I mean, this story makes it seem like James sort of had free reign over what he does, unlike some of the other people. And yet I'm still bothered by this whole alternate history thing. Because when OP said that a subforum had been opened to point out historical discrepancies in the alternate history game, I couldn't help but think that's just an oxymoron of some kind. Like, that's the idea of alternate history. Things will be different. Now, the argument can be made over the part about what minerals Yugoslavia has. I'd say it's not that big a deal, especially if nobody else had an issue with it. But that's just me. Now, OP's second ban is what I have a problem with, because it just kind of seems out of the blue, and I feel like something is missing. He glosses over it so casually, unlike the first ban, that all I can think is something else happened. But that's only more speculation. I don't have any evidence of that. So really, the only conclusion I can come to overall is that this was just a game of immature teenagers that fell apart over time. Hi, this is post-editing me here. Just wanted to add an extra little comment. OP complaining about James lying at that international conference by twisting known facts is probably the most historically accurate thing that happened in that game. That and everyone hating France for seemingly no reason. Anyways, that's the final story for today. I hope you all have a good day, and please consider checking out Heroes of Valeria, our very own D&D actual play series.